Hi, and welcome to Solving Equations Systematically. By the end of this video, you should be able to complete opposite operations to equations in order to solve them systematically. Let's have a look at what that means. First of all, what is an opposite operation? An operation is either a plus, minus, times, or divide. So an opposite operation is knowing what is the opposite of plus, minus, times, and divide. Let's say I had an expression 3 plus 4. I know the answer is 7. Now, if I started with 7 and did the opposite operation of plus, that is take away 4, I would end up with 3, which is the number that I started with. So by completing the opposite operation, I end up with what I started with. This is important. Let's say I had 9 take away 6, and I got the answer of 3. If I start with 3 and plus on 6, I'll get an answer of 9. So I started with 9 and I ended with 9 by completing an opposite operation. It is important to note that plus and minus are opposites of each other. Let's look at multiplication. 4 lots of 5 equals 20. Now if I start with 20 and divide by 5, I end up with 4, which is what I started with. If I do 8 divided by 2, I get 4, but if I start with 4 and multiply by 2, so do the opposite operation, I'll end up with 8, again with what I started with. So times and divide are opposites of each other. It's almost like they undo the operation. Knowing that plus is the opposite of minus, and knowing that times is the opposite of divided by, and vice versa, is very important to solving equations. Let me show you why. Remember from the last video though, that whatever you do to one side of an equation, you have to do to the other. Let's take a look at an example of why it's so important. X plus 10 equals 7 is an equivalent equation. It is balanced at the moment. Here I have a diagram. On the left hand side, I have a box with an X on it and 10 little pink cubes. On the right hand side, I have 17 cubes. What I want to do is get rid of those 10 cubes. So that way I'll only be left with the box with the X on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take them away. I'm going to subtract 10. And if I subtract 10, I'm just left with the box on the left-hand side. But by doing that, I've unbalanced my scale. What I need to do is count up 10 boxes on the right-hand side and take them away as well. Whatever I do to one side, I've got to do to the other. So now I have a balanced equation. And I can count and see that there are 7 boxes on the right-hand side. This means that there are 7 pink cubes for every one of those X's. Now this may have seemed very obvious right at the start. You could have seen x plus 10 equals 17, and by inspection you would have known that x equals 7. This is important what we're doing today because it's all about being systematic, because you're going to be given some very hard equations in the future, and knowing each step by step, each operation by each operation, is going to make it that much easier for you in the future. Let's look at 4 equations. We're not going to look at the diagrams for these. Let's look at 4 equations where we're going to complete the opposite operation to both sides of our equation in order to work out what x equals. I'd like you to try and pause the video and see if you can't work out what they are just by inspection, so that you know when I get my answer through being systematic, you'll know that I'm correct. Okay. Question number 1 says x take away 9 equals 20. So what I want to do here is I want to do the opposite operation of take away 9. That'll leave me with just what x is. The opposite operation of minus 9, or take away 9, is plus 9. And I'm going to do that to both sides of my equal sign. If I add 9 to the left hand side, I'll be left with x, and if I do it to the right hand side, I'll be left with 29. So in this case, x equals 29. Let's go back to the start of this question. It says that x take away 9 will be 20. Does it make sense that our answer is 29? Is 29 take away 9 20? Well, of course it is. It is the only number that you can take away 9 from in order to get 20. And this is important for solving equations. We know that we're correct because we've checked it. Let's look at number 2, 4x equals 16. That is 4 times x equals 16. So I'm going to do the opposite operation of timesing by 4 to both sides of my equal sign. I'm going to divide both sides by 4. If I divide the left-hand side by 4, they'll cancel each other out and I'll just be left with x, which is what I want. 16 divided by 4 is 4. So I'm going to go back and check my answer. I'm going to substitute my x equals 4 into my question. Is 4 times 4 equals 16? Well, of course it is. That way we know that we've solved our equation correctly. Let's go up to number 3. Now that line looks like a fraction, and it is, but it also means divided by. We have some number x divided by 5 equals 3. So what I'm going to do to both sides of my equal sign is I'm going to times both sides by 5. Now it might look that I get 25 on the left hand side because 5 times 5 is 25. But remember that 5 in the question means divided by 5. So if I have a divided by 5 and then I times by 5, I'm left with just my original number, my x. If I times the right hand side by 5, I get 15. So I go back and I check it in my original question. Is 15 divided by 5 equal 3? Yes, it is. So my answer is correct. I'll end off with a 5 plus x equals 8. Now in this question the x is in a different position, but that doesn't matter. That 5 is still a plus 5. It's still a positive 5. So I'm going to take away 5 from both sides of my equal sign. On the left hand side I'll be left with x, and on the right hand side I'll be left with 3. Is 5 plus 3 equal to 8? Yes, it is. I've checked it and I know that I'm correct. Can you notice with all four of my examples here that all four of my examples here, my equal signs are directly underneath each other? That is extremely important for solving. And when you're in year 7, we do expect you to show all your working out and not just write the answers in. This will become important when we get into harder questions. So what should you write? Well, you should pause the video and start off with a heading of opposite operations. And just with this fact, knowing that the opposite operations of each of the plus and minus, times and divide, and what they are. You should also write down the reminder that whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other. That's balance. That's very important. You can finish up by writing down our 4 examples so that you have these in your book in order to help you work systematically for the questions in the future. And that's it. Hopefully you understand the idea of opposite operations and how to solve equations systematically. Good luck.